Welcome to the Obstacle Dominator podcast. Explore what it takes to dominate any obstacle you may encounter in life and get a glimpse inside the minds of the most interesting people on the planet. Now, here's your host, Benny Gifford.
So, I was saying you look like a surfer Jesus.
Yeah, I pretty much only surf and cure people's ails these days. So
It's fantastic. Just handing out miracles left and right.
Yeah, I even made that sandwich that you're eating.
Oh, did you? It's still frozen, and I'm too impatient to wait. So if you could defrost it for me real quick.
Sorry, man. It's hard to zap something through space and I pick up a little bit of cold.
I thought you were our Lord and Savior. You can do anything you want. This is breaching on ridiculously offensive to any Christian listeners. For anybody who needs to slam some quick calories, Uncrustables PB&Js are the best things in the world.
I did used to eat quite a few of those back when I was like 13, getting ready for lacrosse games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do eat orange peels. I actually just finished eating those. So I'm basically a 12-year-old at a soccer game. I eat Uncrustable PB&Js and orange peels.
Wow.
Yeah. So what are you in right now? It looks like a green room on the other half over there.
Yeah, I call it my atrium. So it's like it used to be a balcony, and then it's just floor-to-ceiling windows now instead, in nice enclosed space, and it's just, as you can see, a beautiful spot to set up a workstation.
Yeah, that's fantastic. When I do one of those dream boards, or I envision like my perfect home, when I'm shooting for, the number one place I look at is this huge, it's like a kitchen / living space where, I mean, we'll forget about the kitchen, but I'm spinning on one of those really nice, expensive spinning bikes, and I'm just surrounded by like really high quality glass windows around me, and I'm on the edge of a mountain, and it's one of those houses that like it has stories that go down the mountain and stick out farther and farther. And so this is just glass, and it's raining, and it's like Pacific Northwest-y type green, and it's just, it's beautiful. And the water's dripping down the glass windows. I'm getting a little turned on over here talking about my perfect home.
Yeah, man, you really sold that to me. That was beautiful.
Doesn't it sound amazing? And you're just sitting there spinning.
Yeah.
It sounds like a commercial for one of those Peloton bikes. You know, you see the people in their super rich living room, and they're just like, I'm on like a $12,000 piece of equipment here. No biggie. I don't know how much.
Yeah.
But all right, so Matt, dude, we have not talked since you pieced out to Australia. I mean, kind of here and there, but you just recap real quick from us meeting, the big changes that you've done and stages in your life, being this nutrition van life guru guy to where you are now and this podcast.
Yeah, well, when we first met, I converted a Sprinter van and was traveling the US and Canada in that thing. So yeah, I probably looked pretty homeless to you at that point, but I did have a pretty successful nutrition coaching business. And then I ended up, before we met, Benny, I had met my now wife in Australia. So she came over to the US to visit shortly after we met. And I realized, wow, I could go the distance with this woman. So then I made a big leap and moved out to Australia for a year. Dip the toes in the water, see if that emotional thing continued, and it did. So since we met, I've gotten married, which I reckon is a pretty big rite of passage in life change there. And I also about a year ago started focusing on not just mentoring coaches to work for Beyond Macros for my business, but also starting to mentor other nutrition coaches who don't necessarily work for us. Because we have very specific people that we work with. And I realized, wow, if I mentor one person, they can go out and have a ripple of impact with clients that I could never serve because they don't fit who we work with. So, in terms of a business perspective, Beyond Macro is still running successfully as a nutrition coaching business. I'm focusing on mentoring other nutrition coaches, and I've got a ring on my finger.
Yeah, well, put that up to the screen. Let me see real quick.
It's cool. It's actually ebony wood with some metal bands through it.
Dude, that's cool. Congrats, by the way, when I was looking at rings and stuff back with my ex, and we were talking about marriage for a long time, and we actually ended up getting her a ring. When I started showing her the rings that I was, we didn't take the traditional route of, oh, it's a total surprise. No, we ended up looking for rings together for her, because when I showed her my idea of a ring, it was some like gorgeous, like Lord of the Rings, elven wood thing. It was beautiful. It was ridiculously beautiful. And she was like, yeah, don't give me that at all. And so for like 6 months, we were like shopping and fine tuning and trying to find something that she liked. She liked like the typical, just like somebody threw up diamonds all over a piece of metal and they stuck together. Just you can't even look at it. It's too bright. And I was like, that's so gaudy and blah. But I had been thinking for years and years and years, when I was romanticizing marriage and stuff like that, I was like, I'm gonna go mine this meteor that smashes into the earth, and I'm gonna be the first person to take the rock from it, and I'm gonna learn how to smithy or whatever. I don't know how to, whatever, make it myself, and it'll be some famous, I don't know, something. But instead we broke up, so that's a sob story right there. But anyways, so you were driving around the van. It's funny, I was thinking about doing that. I had some life changes happen, but I think it's still in the books for me to do that. How long were you living in that van, which was a pretty sweet van?
Almost a year.
Wow, holy crap.
Yeah, not quite.
Were you nervous about doing it? Like, what kind of living situation were you coming from? And did it make you feel a little nervous going into that? Because my first thought when I do it is, I've always grown up in big houses because I'm a part of a family of 8. And even though they weren't always like mansions or super nice houses, it's just been like high ceilings, several rooms to choose from. And so to pick one living space as that's it with me and my dog, it worries me a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had like a really nice big one bedroom place in Venice with like really amazing landscaping, and it was like really my dream place in Venice Beach. And so I left that place to live out of a backpack and travel. So I was traveling internationally for a little over a year, which is where I met my wife. And I transitioned from traveling out of a backpack to the van life. So for me, it's interesting. It wasn't necessarily a step up in terms of space, because I was staying, like when I was in Bali, I was staying in some really nice places. When I was in Australia, I was staying in some really nice places. So I was staying in nice places while I was traveling, sometimes a hostel, but sometimes baller spots. And so I had this, really my only context or my only consistency was my backpack and what I had with me. Wow. And then, so my transition in my head at that point, I was like, all right, I'm craving a little bit of the anchors to habits. It's like in your house, it's like you can go and you can cook a meal when you want to cook a meal, and you might have some kettlebells in the garage that you can pick up and swing around if you can't get to the gym. And when I was out of the backpack, a lot of those habits that really helped me feel grounded were just out the window. It was really hard to make them happen. It took more energy to make them happen than they were worth. So that's why I thought a van would be good. I was like, I can build a kitchen into it. I can bring kettlebell and mace and, medicine balls and all this stuff with me so that I can go out for a run and, have a sandbag to come back to. And I was actually able to train again. I was actually able to cook again. And that's what I really liked about it. But
what just popped into my head was, were you ever single while you had that van?
I was very interested in my now wife.
I'm just thinking, I'm thinking about issues for me actually doing this. Hey girl, met on Bumble, you want to come back to my van? like I'm just thinking about how that whole side goes down.
Oh dude, you have to build a sweet freaking van, because there's a sexiness to van life right now. Like, I don't know if you saw my finished van, but my finished van had like really beautifully stained wood, and the bed had a nice spread on it. And I made this day bed that had beautiful upholstery, and like the kitchen sink was one of those farmhouse style kitchen sinks that people dream about. It was actually a nice van. Well, and I'd be traveling around and there'd be other people who I saw it and they'd have like a pallet bed. They didn't even insulate it. Like, they didn't put walls on it. They literally just like took a bolt and bolted like an IKEA bookshelf onto the wall and then like bolted a pallet bed to the ground. And it looked like if you walked in there, you were going to be hanging in a meat freezer within the next 10 minutes.
Well,
so it's just,
so that was my picture was like doing it the way you did it, like really putting some money and some effort and some time into it. Because if I live somewhere, I want it to, that's one thing I really value is the space where I live, my home base. I make sure it's really nice and comfortable and exactly how I want it. But it's the getting there. It's like, oh, no, I promise it's really nice. It's okay. I'm not going to drive off and steal you. It's okay. But that wouldn't be a problem. I mean, I've had girls meet me in sketchier places in a van, I'm pretty sure. But
I'm sure. I'm sure it wouldn't be an issue. Let's put it that way.
So, okay, so let's rip back up just a little bit. Beyond macros, you mentioned it a couple times. You've been on this podcast before, back in season 2 with Hunter, and I didn't get to dive into detail as much as I wanted to because Hunter was either hungover or intoxicated. I can't remember, and as he is famous for, rerouted the conversation anytime we started making headway into any like solid point. So at the time that I met you in person was for the Tough Mudder X World Championships, and I, long story short, had diarrhea through that race, and it made me so angry because it's like you put in all these hours, all this time and effort to train and be fit, and then you do something that you don't even know what you're doing, and you end up with a case of the poopy pants. And so I was talking to you afterwards, and you were dropping all these like super easy basic pieces of wisdom on me, and I was like, are you kidding me? How did I not talk to this guy before? Like, I'd heard carb loading, and I'd heard, I'd studied a lot about nutrition, but studied meaning like hearing my bros like Hunter tell me what to do, and looking at Google research and like top 10 ways to get rock hard abs, which is all a load of crap. And you were able to explain things in such a simple way about how carb loading isn't just carb loading. It's like there's 3 different types of carbs, and like you can't just eat a ton of pasta because that's one type of carb. You got to diversify it with like fructose and fruit stuff and things like that. And so I a couple days ago or yesterday I posted, and so I do have a few questions from listeners who were like, "Ooh, a nutrition guy." But where do you have your knowledge base from? Why is it that you seem to have a handle on this better than most people? Is it because you have access to the same information, you're just putting it in a very palatable way, or how do you know this stuff?
For me, it came from application. So when we met, I was super, super interested for my own personal reasons in nutrition for endurance performance, but also nutrition for like Tough Mudder X, where we're talking, I'm doing tons and tons of miles in a week training to get my aerobic base up. But then we're doing something super anaerobic like Tough Mudder X. And so I just really dove into the research, and, I got my CISSN, so pretty much sports and nutrition certification, about a year before that. And whenever I apply knowledge, I just soak it up and retain it really well. And through application, figure out what works for me. And luckily, since I had a big client base, lots of people that were also interested in obstacle course racing, that I was able to see what was working for other OCR athletes. So like for the example that you were talking about with carb loading, it's like traditionally you'd see someone who's saying, okay, you should be carb loading, really, really high carb levels for 3 days up to the race. Some people hear carb load and they're like, oh, I just eat a big bowl of pasta the night before the race, throw a big old gut bomb in there. But the thing is, you can still, like for Tough Mudder X, we didn't need to be like carb loading 3 days up to the actual race. So for me, I realized a lot of people were getting poopy pants like you from carb loading. So if you just carb load up to the day before the race, when you're probably not going to put a big training day in anyway, you can still get enough carbs into your muscles. And then you don't have to have a huge carb day the day before and poop your pants at the race.
So why is that? Because you would think that TMX would be the epitome of the reason you would have to carb load. Like when I see people carb loading for a long endurance event where they're barely even going to leave their fat burning zone, I'm like, that to me, right off the bat, doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But then TMX, where we had 3 like high intensity 12 to 15 minute efforts 3 times throughout the day, I was like, well, that's the perfect reason to carb load, because you're going to burn a ton and then rest, and you're calorically, you're still going to be burning stuff in between. And then there's 3 pulses up and down, up in high heart rate zone where you're burning tons of carbs. So why is it that for an event like that, you don't really need a carb load the way most people think?
Well, it's more avoiding the GI distress. So for an athlete like you, if you know that you're prone to poopy pants, especially if you do like a big pasta carb load the day before, then it's just tailoring it towards you. It would be, okay, we're still going to carb load that week. We're going to chuck a bunch of carbs in while you still probably have some harder training days. So let's say your race is on Saturday. So then Friday, we'll just eat a normal amount of carbs. You're probably not going to be putting out a huge effort on Friday. And then Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, we can put more carbs in the tank.
Okay. And why is it that most people think it's the 3 days leading up to an event where it sounds like it's more before, like my body can hold on to carbs that long?
Well, that's what most of the research is on, is those type of carb loads. I mean, you don't even technically need to carb load, but you can put yourself into a situation where you might have some GI distress if you're depleting your carb stores over a long race and you're taking in too much carbohydrate per hour. Gotcha. So that's why if you're looking at any of your energy gels or any of your, pretty much any like carb gel that you're taking or any, carb powders that you might be taking, it's like take this much every 45 minutes with this much water, because there's a specific ratio of the gel to water or the powder to water that they're looking for. You want a certain concentration of carbohydrate in there in order to minimize the chance that you're going to have some gastric distress. And for some people, a certain threshold of carbs per hour, especially in liquid form, tends to lead to some distress in the GI tract.
And how do you figure out what that is for each individual person?
You got to practice. Like, if you know that you've got a race that's one of your target races, one of your goal races that you want to do well in, then I'm sure you're going to have some training simulations for that race at some point during your training. And that's when it's low stakes for you to actually practice one of these fueling strategies, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
So you do it when the stakes are low and you can actually test and see what works or doesn't work for you. And then you can apply what works to the actual race.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. You see that new vegan documentary? What's it called? You know what I'm talking about?
Game Changers? Is that the one on Netflix?
No. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's it. I didn't even realize it was a vegan documentary, so I started watching it. And I watched the whole thing, and it's extremely compelling, if you believe everything and the way everything is cited in there. And so, of course, I've learned my lesson about just taking, documentaries at their face value and just trusting them. And so within half a second of searching online, I see a million articles of this is so much crap because of this, this, and this. And so I was like, all right, this is ridiculous. The only way to figure out what works and what's bullcrap is to just freaking try it out yourself. And it sounds like that's what you're reverbing back at us. Like there could be an equation for my weight to height ratio and how many carbs I should be burning, but it really comes down to how I actually feel and actually trying it out.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, for me right now, once I figure out what works for somebody in terms of their nutrition, I'm going to get more results for them if I focus on their mindset. And if I actually focus on things outside of just the numbers on the nutrition. Because most people aren't hamstringed by like, oh, I had 5 grams too few carbohydrates, during the race.
Right.
Most people aren't hamstringed by that. Most people are hamstringed by things between the ears that tend to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Hunter's favorite expression is calling people head cases when they have bad races.
Yeah.
That was actually one of the questions from Escobar_OCR. He said, opinion on Game Changers. So, opinion on Game Changers.
I didn't watch it. And I don't watch nutrition documentaries or nutrition-focused documentaries because they don't have any breakthrough research. The research is going to be published in a reputable journal before a documentary filmmaker has a chance to get their hands on it. So the chance that I'm going to learn some completely, breakthrough finding, from a documentary is really, really low. And most of the time there's a different agenda for a documentary. So I could watch those type of documentaries because ultimately, a lot of people are going to be asking about game changers. So, if I wanted to write an article about it, or if I wanted to talk to my clients about it, sure, maybe I'd watch it for that reason. But for me, it just feels like a real waste of time for me to watch it, because I'm not going to learn anything that I couldn't learn without the documentary.
Without the music and the pitches to emotion and, the way they're going to angle the information. Yeah,
exactly. It's not productive for me.
Yeah.
I don't even like to read nutrition books because most of the time they take a strong angle, set up straw man arguments for the other side, burn the straw man down, and make their side seem very compelling. There's very few books I've read on nutrition that don't have a high degree of bias. So,
what I found, and people think I'm weird because they see me reading these things, but I like textbooks because they're more about just the clinical research, and then they almost always offer like every countering point you can think of all in one book. So it's like there's have you heard of steel manning?
No.
It's like the opposite of straw manning.
Opposite of straw manning, it sounds like,
It's a smart technique it's like the scientific method. It's like, look, if you have an opinion and you disagree with somebody else's opinion or hypothesis, you steel man their argument. You make it as strong as possible. And then if you can still find that it's wrong, well, that's a big deal, because you actually proved a really good point wrong rather than just like straw manning it. And I feel like textbooks really do that a lot. Like I have this, it's funny. I actually think that, what's his name? The guy who wrote Becoming a Supple Leopard, Kelly
Starrett.
Yeah. His looks like a textbook. And I was like, you little tricky bastard. It's like all framed like it. And as soon as I realized that about the book I was reading called The Science of Running by Steve Magnus, I was like, these guys know what they're doing. They're making it look like a textbook. And so now I'm like hypercritical. I'm like, okay, hold on. Are you leading me by the nose here? There's another documentary. I don't really know if you call it a documentary. It's called Sex Explained. I was on the treadmill and I was super bored with watching The Office. So I just switched to whatever was next. And as I'm watching this, I have that same filter on in my head of, okay, what is the point of this? Like, are they really just trying to educate people on all things sex, or are they going to like make a pitch for a certain type of birth control? And then we're going to find out that the company who funded this owns that birth control method or whatever. And so far, I mean, I'm only like a few episodes in, so I haven't noticed any hard push for that. But let's get these listener questions out of the way.
Cool. And if you look at any like articles or podcasts or videos that I put out, if I put out references, you'll never see a book. You'll only see textbooks. Or generally, I don't even like to cite randomized controlled trials, like one-off studies. I like to look at meta-analyses, systematic reviews, and then sometimes I'll look at a narrative review, which is pretty much taking the science and making it a bit more approachable. It's the narrative style. And then that becomes a good reference point for looking at different randomized controlled trials that might provide some clues. So if anybody's interested in diving into their own bit of research, then the best place to look is for this crowd, the OCR crowd, look at the International Society of Sports Nutrition. Because if your goals are performance oriented in particular, a lot of their stuff is going to be what you want to look at. And they create these position stands. So essentially they get a bunch of researchers together and they'll be like, all right, we're going to do caffeine. So Benny, you'll go out and you'll look at how caffeine, look at dosage, look at toxicity, look at a bunch of these things. And then Matt, you'll go out and you'll look at how caffeine affects performance for tactical athletes, anaerobic athletes, aerobic athletes. And then, Hunter, you'll go out and probably, tell a bunch of jokes so that we're entertained. And then, and they'll just get a bunch of people that focus in on, okay, how does caffeine affect this domain? How does caffeine affect this domain? And then they'll put out a position stand on caffeine that's in a pretty narrative style. It's pretty approachable. There is obviously some sciencey stuff, but
Right.
I don't think anybody's going to be diving into research who doesn't have some degree of interest in the sciencey bits. So I think that's a really good place. And those position stands always reference controlled trials, meta-analyses, systematic reviews, that if you want to get into the weeds a little bit more, then you can click out to those studies, try to find them on ResearchGate, because that's usually open access, and you can really get your nose in there, learn a thing or two for yourself.
Have you ever come across one of these narrative style summaries of a scientific experiment and disagreed with the way they were translating the data? Because that's one of the issues I have with the narrative style, which I prefer, but I have this issue because it's like, how do I know that this isn't slightly biased, like the way you're translating the way the data came out? Like maybe me with a different brain sees the same data conclusion that you do, and I apply it differently. Have you ever come across something where you were like, wait?
Honestly, I try to take a beginner's mind and realize that these people conducting this research are PhDs, and I don't have those letters after my name. They've gone through a lot more schooling than I have in terms of conducting research. Doesn't mean that every single person who's a PhD, I think, is foolproof, but generally in a narrative review, the way that I approach it is to actually read a lot of the material that they're referencing. So oftentimes, like for example, I recently did a video on muscle gain for CrossFit. So I was looking at a narrative review on hypertrophy research, so muscle gain research essentially. And when I did look at some of the proposed mechanisms for hypertrophy, and then I looked at the source materials, I was like, okay, they're saying that this is a potential way that muscle gain happens. But when I look at the actual reference texts, those reference texts are saying, this is still plausible, but we can't say conclusively that this contributes to muscle gain in any substantial way. So sometimes I'll be looking at something and I'll be like, okay, maybe the way that they're wording it makes it seem, if somebody weren't going to look at the reference text, like, oh yeah, this is going to lead to muscle gain, when really the reference text says, yeah, it could be a plausible mechanism that leads to muscle gain, but it's far from conclusive type of thing.
I've been in marketing for so long that like I'm in the auto show industry, and there's a million brands or companies or organizations that rate vehicles. And so for Ram, it'll be JD Powers just awarded Ram heavy duty truck of the year. And it's like, oh, cool. That means it's the best heavy duty truck in the world. And then you go over to the Chevy display and they're saying, well, Cars and Trucks just named the Chevy Malibu the best truck. Whatever, even though it's a car. And they all find these, and with nutrition, it gets even dicier, because someone will say, creatine has been clinically proven to increase blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, if we reverse and look all the way back at where this claim came from, it's clinically proven, well, not creatine, but let's say it's clinically proven to increase by like a negligible amount. And so, but somebody's now obsessed with this supplement, even though it's essentially doing nothing. And so with those narrative styles, you see news outlets doing it all the time. Like Time magazine? I forget what publication it was, but it was some pretty well-known publication said that scientists show that smelling your partner's farts can help you live longer. And when you trace it back through, you see the completely logical like game of telephone from the original data all the way over to saying smelling your partner's farts makes you live longer. And so maybe I've gone way too far to the side of the spectrum of just thinking everything's a freaking conspiracy and like, okay, but what does it really mean and blah, blah, blah. So what was the name of that word?
There's a difference between a narrative review and an editorial. So you're describing an editorial. A narrative review is still something that a researcher or a group of researchers is taking a look at research and reviewing it in just a more narrative style. So it's still going to be published in a reputable journal. It's not something that's going to be published in Time magazine. It's not going to be something that's published in, Business Insider as a press release. It's actually something that's going to be in generally a reputable journal.
What was the name of that organization again that you said earlier?
The ISSN, the International Society of Sports Nutrition.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I'll put that in the show notes for anybody, because that's a fantastic resource.
Yeah. And yeah, man, honestly, quickly on the game changers thing too. It's like another reason that I don't like to get into the weeds with stuff like that is I see so much polarity in nutrition and tribalism. And I think it really hurts the average person, because it's like you'll have somebody who, like right now, the big thing that I'm seeing, especially with the climate change argument, is you'll have the plant-based crowd and the vegan crowd who takes a lot of flack from like the paleo or kind of the cow obsessed crowd. And so all of a sudden they're yelling across the hall at each other. So, paleo crowd's like, oh, you dumb vegans eating all your plant-based stuff, low bioavailability and, anti-nutrients and rah, rah, rah. And then all of a sudden you've got the vegans like, well, you cow eaters, cow farts are ruining the environment. And, you're cruel to animals and you're going to get heart disease and die. And so, both sides are yelling across the hall at each other. And, the poor average person in the middle is like, they're like stuck, just, oh man, if I go to that side, then I'm an idiot in the eyes of those people. If I go to this side, I'm an idiot in the eyes of those people. So only the people that are prone to the tribalism, that feel like they want to identify with one of the extremes or the tribes in diets, actually, feels confident, and then everybody else feels stuck. Everybody else has that, there's so much conflicting information, and they don't do anything. And so it holds the majority of people back, where you've just got these people at either end of the spectrum, the small minority at either end of the spectrum being really, really loud and yelling at each other and scaring everybody else. And so I think that's really counterproductive for the masses. Because most of the time the arguments aren't, oh yeah, here's the good points from your side of the hall, and here's the good points from our side of the hall. Can't we all be friends? In a way that's productive for everybody? Can we recognize, because both of those sides now are like, well, cows are actually, are grazing mammals. They're actually good for the environment if you do it right with managed grazing and silvopasture and all this. And then the vegans are like, well, but then they'll be like, the Beyond Meat burger is emitting, more fossil fuels than grass-fed beef. And you've got the other side that's just, like, well, studies have shown that, plants actually have less emissions for the earth than, grazing animals and rah, rah, rah. And both of them really just want people to be healthier. Both sides really want the earth to be healthier and the environment to be better, but they have different perspectives. So they're calling each other idiots. They're not realizing that they both want the same thing. So what they really want is everybody to want the same thing and to get there the same way that they want to get there. It's a really dangerous way of going about things, but it's sexy, so it gets attention.
Dude, it's super sexy. I mean, it sounds like you're, that's like the human condition. If you just took out the specific examples of like cows and vegan, you could be talking about politics. You could be talking about religion, like anything. Just humans go extreme, and then it becomes such a identity-focused thing. Like if you're a vegan, it's like your whole identity. Like that's got to be like your Instagram name is like vegan fruit boy, or something like fuck meat eaters or something like that. And the other side is like you're a macho man who hates vegans and shoots things if you eat meat. It's like, well, no, not quite. And it's the same thing politically, everything. That was a great description of that. Moving a little bit back to what you said about caffeine. I don't remember if this was you or somebody else that I see as a wise nutrition source, but I remember hearing that caffeine was, or coffee is a very subpar fuel source for exercising compared to, the way it shows up in most pre-workouts. What do you think?
Well, coffee isn't a fuel source because it doesn't contain any energy.
Not fuel, sorry. The stimulus, the caffeine that you get from it.
So I'm not really sure where that's coming from. It's kind of a vague statement, to be honest, that coffee is worse than or different than caffeine from a pre-workout. So
I'm now actually remembering, and it's funny you say that because this person was pushing a pre-workout supplement that he had made. So that used a specific type of caffeine instead of coffee. So it would make sense for him to say, don't drink coffee, drink my pre-workout.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you can make the statement that it's a diuretic or whatever. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't know if it technically is, but if I smell coffee, I'm like, oh, it's time to poop. It is, right?
Yeah, it's same. I talked to, this guy's really smart too, for anyone that wants to nerd out. Dr. Mike T. Nelson, he and I chatted about caffeine on one of my podcasts. And yeah, actually there is that kind of state dependent learning that we have. So over time, because caffeine is a diuretic and you smell coffee, you drink coffee, you poo, well, eventually the trigger in your brain just becomes you smell coffee and then all of a sudden your bowels start moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
There was actually, I think he referenced the study where people actually were doing a test and they had the smell of coffee pumped into the room, and the people who actually had the smell of coffee, I think did better on the test. Don't quote me on this, but yeah, it was something along those lines that got us starting to talk about, smelling coffee and pooing. So,
dude, I totally believe it. It's like the study that shows that if you're running and you're starting to get low on fuel, if you just have the taste of something sweet in your mouth, but you don't even ingest it necessarily, then you'll get a similar boost in energy as if you actually ingested the sweet source of whatever it was. I freaking love how the human brain does that, because to me it shows that we're like, at the same time that people are like, oh, human beings are so silly, I'm like, that shows that human beings are freaking like amazing. Like we don't, like in a perfect world, I think of like an Avatar state or a Jesus type fellow who understands how to work the body the way all these mystical things make us think we're silly. It's like, who knows? Like that 40-day, 40-night fast thing that Jesus did in the Bible. It's like, well, it doesn't sound that crazy when you think about what the body can do if you actually take hold of the placebo effect and know how to work it. Sounds amazing. All right.
Yeah. And that's what I meant before when I said, like, for the most part, when I'm working with people, it's like, once we get the nutrition dialed in, most of the work is between the ears.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, it was last year. I was drinking coffee like almost every day, and I would cycle off for like 2 weeks in between. But it got to where I'd get out of bed, I'd eat my food, I'd get super pumped up for my workout because I was thinking, oh, sweet, I might have coffee. And I start like running down the stairs toward my coffee machine, and I realized, dude, you're so pumped up right now. You don't need caffeine. And it was because I was so used to this format of, oh, I'm going to drink coffee now, that I didn't need to drink the coffee. I was already pumped up as if I had just drank the coffee.
Yeah.
All right. We got OCR Dave wants to know, where do most people fail at nutrition, even up to decent athletes who watch food intake?
Where do most people fail? I mean, the average people, and this isn't just an opinion, this is literally working with thousands of people in our organization. Most people struggle at first to eat enough protein for their body composition goals. In terms of actually eating enough protein to meet your minimum daily requirements, most people don't struggle with that. But in terms of eating enough protein to reach their body composition goals, that tends to be one of them. For me, a lot of the people we've worked with are kind of CrossFit or OCR style. And there's this interesting thing where paleo became really popular in the CrossFit community. And a lot of people from CrossFit kind of crossed over to OCR, so brought that with them. And that tended to be like low carb. And I think for a lot, most OCR athletes would do better with more carbohydrate intake. And so I was seeing a lot of good athletes who were hamstringing themselves by being low carb.
I tried. So
that's the average Joe, and then that's the athlete.
Gotcha. No, that was a perfect answer. Have you found, or do you know if it really super matters? Like, to what level does it matter the type of protein you're ingesting? Because I know there's protein in greens, in nuts, in meat, and all kinds of different stuff. And I really don't eat that much meat. When I'm in the kind of training cycle I'm in right now, where it's high volume and I'm lifting pretty heavy and a lot, I'll eat like maybe 3 ribeyes a week. And when I'm not in the cycle, I might have like just meat once every couple weeks. And then other than that, I'm getting it from all kinds of different mixed in sources. Do you think I'm losing any big, but by not diversifying the type of protein I'm eating?
Dude, it's really hard to say. Cause it's like, what's your goal? Like because for example, we had one guy maybe he's listening to this. I hope he doesn't mind me bringing it up, but like Kevin Gregory, Bubbles the Clown, worked with us for a little while, and he's a big dude.
Yeah, he is.
You know, he played football and he's got a lot of mass, and not because he's fat, but because like he probably packed on a ton of muscle during football. So for him, he was one of the first people that we worked with that was like, can you help me lose muscle in the safest, most effective way?
Yeah, he's a big guy.
And so, yeah. And so, you know, we did that, but you know, for him, there's going to be a different answer to that question than if you were like, okay, oh my God, I can barely pick up the Atlas stone, or I can barely, you know, do anything requiring me to carry something heavy. Then well, maybe we want to do everything we can, put more muscle on your body.
So like OCR Dave did, two different scenarios. Somebody like me who I don't need any more strength. I just need to maintain healthy weight. I don't need to get any bigger. I don't necessarily need to get any stronger. I just need to maintain healthy weight without it getting in the way of my performance. And then an athlete who, because Bubbles is not a great example because he's rare, like you said, somebody who is needing to build some lean muscle, because assuming we're talking OCR endurance strength people, not just like power lifters, somebody who's having to, you know, build lean muscle, do they really need to diversify their protein intake, like protein shakes mixed in with meat and all kinds of different stuff, or it doesn't really matter as long as they're hitting a certain amount of protein?
I mean, there's ideas around the protein efficiency. So like how much of because for anybody who's doesn't know, protein is made up of amino acids. So ultimately, if you eat meat, your body is going to then break down the big protein. So imagine you're eating beef. So a cow's body had to actually take a bunch of amino acids, building blocks of protein, and they had to create cow shoulder, you know? So then they sequence these amino acids together in a way that creates cow shoulder. And then when you eat cow shoulder, it's this big chain of amino acids that is cow shoulder. So then your body has to go through the process of actually chopping that down into building blocks again, because you can't use cow shoulder to make Benny shoulder directly. You need to break it back down into the building blocks so then your body can sequence them in a way that makes Benny shoulder. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So some proteins are going to be a bit more efficient in terms of your ability to then ingest them, break them down and use them than others. And so you want to have obviously some efficient proteins. There's also the idea behind there's essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. So essential amino acids are the ones that your body can't produce itself. So this is a popular one, like collagen protein supplements. Collagen is something your body can produce. So your body can actually create all of the amino acids that are the building blocks of collagen, and it can actually create collagen. That's how it builds up your cartilage tissues and your connective tissues. All right, so none of those amino acids in a collagen supplement are essential amino acids, but the essential amino acids are essential for lean muscle building, skeletal muscle building. All right, so we want to make sure that we're ingesting all of the essential amino acids in the right ratio. So one way I've heard it put is that if you wanted to build 10 cars, but you had, let's say, 40 tires, okay, I've got enough for 10 cars, but you've got 5 steering columns, well, you've only got 5 cars. And so with the amino acids, like if you've taken too much of one, but you don't have enough of another of, let's say, the steering column amino acid, then all of a sudden you don't have enough amino acids available to create as many proteins for your body structures. So, you know, that's not something that you have to be like conscious of as an athlete or as a person. You don't have to be like counting how much, you know, it doesn't have to be a spreadsheet of, okay, I've had this much, you know, valine and this much leucine and like over the course of a day. You just want to be pretty good about, you know, getting enough protein in. If you're eating mostly plant-based proteins, eat a bit more. They're a little bit less efficient. So, you know, err towards a little bit higher total protein intake and you should be all right. You know, if you're eating a bit more meat or if you're having a lot of, let's say, protein shakes that are going to already be like big proteins broken down into smaller building blocks, or if you're taking an essential amino acid supplement, which is, you know, essential amino acids might be in some of your carb gels, then, okay, you can probably go a little bit more conservative with your protein intake because those might be more efficient.
On the backpacking trip I just did, one of the people we were hiking with was taking BCAAs all the time. And Hunter was like, oh, yeah, that's one of the best, great ways to get energy and fuel throughout, something like this. And I've never messed with BCAAs. So you said essential and non-essential. Where does BCAAs fall in there?
BCAAs is just 3 of the 9 essential amino acids.
And those are what, like, they've been identified as like really important or the most important or something?
No, they're not, honestly. Like, most research shows that they aren't super, super effective if you're eating enough protein overall throughout the course of the day. They just happen to be ones that when you are doing exercise, they tend to get, I guess, depleted a little bit more. Don't quote me on that. Okay. But that was one of the original justifications for it, was that when you are exercising, they tend to be the ones where the levels drop the most. And so most people are like, well, if the levels are dropping the most, let's just put it in at that targeted time. But for the most part, that's looking at this small window of time while you work out, they drop, and like, okay, let's chuck it in there. But then if we extend the timeline, it's like, does doing that in that small band of time lead to results on a bigger timeline? Right. And when it comes down to it, any result that you would want to measure, that doesn't actually provide much significant effect.
Okay, so it's one of those things that hypothetically makes sense, but across the spectrum of the entire assessment of the human body, it doesn't really pan out the way people think it does. But like with the way this person was using it on the backpacking trip in a low caloric state where we're only eating 3 times a day, and those are like little MREs and little freeze-dried meals, maybe it could help as just a protein source.
Well, it's not a complete protein because it's only got 3 out of the 9 essential amino acids.
Right. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. Gotcha. All right. Let's pick DLong underscore OCR. Sounds like.
Are you going to have anybody who doesn't have a handle with their name underscore OCR?
Actually, yes. Those, what do we got? Yeah, those are the only 2. They just happen to be right next to each other.
That's 3 actually now.
Is it? No. Oh, no. Shoot. You're right. Yeah, it's 3 of them. Wow. People love us. I wonder what these people, did they not have Instagrams before like 2011, 2012? I didn't find out about OCR until 2014. So no, mine doesn't say OCR. You can't change that, right? Like you can't change.
You can change your handle.
Oh, can you? Okay. All right. That makes more sense. I was like, man, there's a lot of OG OCR people on here. What do we got here? Why have I been farting so much since I started eating plant-based? Asking for my girlfriend. I feel like we might have.
D Long, I'm sorry I made fun of your Instagram because you're funny, man. So it's usually when you make a switch to plant-based, there tends to be a little bit of a shift in the microbiome. So all the little fungus and bacteria, all the little yeasts, which are fungus, throughout your digestive tract, because as you change kind of your fuel mix, or if you change the makeup of what you're eating, then some of those little microbes that prefer certain fuel sources will maybe get starved out, while other ones that prefer the new fuel sources will actually propagate. So you'll notice probably a little bit of a shift in what's going on in your microbiome. So when you fart, it's usually a giant aggregate fart of all of the little yeast and fungus and bacteria and all those little things throughout your digestive tract. So all of these ones that are now being fed a bunch of plants, whether it's through resistant starch or different fiber, probably a little bit less meat. So some of those ones are probably getting a little bit less of the proteins that they like to break down. You're probably experiencing a bit of a shift. And some are dying off and some are propagating, and the ones that are propagating are farting a lot more, so you're farting a lot more.
So it's not a life sentence. It might just be a transitional period.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a life sentence. It could be a transitional period, but who knows? Maybe now you've got a microbiome that's more fart prone.
More delicate. That's enough reason.
Yeah, well, the thing is, a lot of people, when they switch plant-based, especially if they're trying to hit enough protein, tend to eat a lot more beans. Beans tend to bring a lot more dietary fiber. Usually the dietary fiber intake goes up pretty substantially when people switch to a plant-based, as long as they're not like switching from, every single day I'm eating chicken fingers, French fries, pasta, and meatballs to, okay, I'm eating soy, chicken with an I instead of an E with, French fries and still having pasta with meatballs in air quotes.
Wait, what is that? Like a vegan version of chicken?
Yeah.
I was like, what is chicken with an I? But okay, I get some fruity marketing ploy by vegans.
Hey man, don't make fun of vegans. You're just being a big, mean, cow-loving, yelling across the hall, scaring everybody in the middle kind of guy right now, Benny.
Hey man, I'm eating organic vegan gummy bears right now. So, no, sorry, they're not vegan. Psych. Yeah, no justification. My PB&J, that's vegan, right? There's no animal products in there. Shit molasses. No, I bet there's. Oh yeah, sorry. Contains milk ingredients. Sorry, vegans. Probably the most repelling people on the planet are paleo athletes and vegan athletes, because they can't just be athletes that eat their diet. They need to make sure that you know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite annoying. Okay, you know what? This is the last one, and we already kind of talked about this, but let's just get a soundbite type of rundown of this from Adam L. Beach _OCR. No, there's no OCR on that one. I'd like to hear a rundown on carb loading, how to do it, and what the benefits are. So somebody showing up to a typical Spartan race, I don't really think the fueling is going to be drastically different for. Let's just pick a mid-distance race. It's the week leading up to it. What are you doing? Just an average, let's say an age division athlete. So you're pushing, you're competitive. What do you do?
Well, you pick a few training simulations beforehand and you test whether or not that strategy feels good for you. Whether or not you feel more fueled. What's that?
Not that
week.
Right.
No. I would never recommend that somebody is like, okay, I got a race coming up. I'm listening to this podcast. This guy is telling me about carb loading. He said to eat, let's say, 8 grams per kilogram of body weight every day for 3 days leading up to the race. I'm just going to do it for the first time before this race, and I'm going to do way better. That's not a way to approach it, because you're throwing a variable into the mix that is just a wild card. It's like when I took my SATs for the first time and I was like, hey, my friend has this ADD medication that's supposed to make you smarter called Adderall. Maybe I should take that before my SATs because then I'll do better. And it was just throwing a wrench in the gears, and I did horribly compared to when I just went in sober.
I got to pause you for a second, because it's so funny. When you say it, it sounds so obvious and stupid. But Hunter has, because I came into the sport like fanboying over him for years, anything he would say, I would just do, no matter how ridiculous it sounded, how little sense it made. First, and I just realized this happened, first Tough Mudder X, the inaugural first one, I'm rooming with him, and he drinks. I walk into the bathroom, and he's got an empty bottle of organic, raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar. And I'm like, dude, did you just chug that entire thing? And he goes, yeah, of course I did. And I don't know him super well, so I can't tell that he's joking. And so I go out and buy one, and I go to the kitchen sink, and I'm like, okay, let's do this. And I just start chugging it as fast as I can, because anybody who's drank that stuff, it's way more potent than any alcohol you could ever try and chug. And so I get probably 6 to 8 ounces in this thing before my throat just seizes, it closes. And so I start like gargling because I can't get anything to go down. And I had like damaged the lining of like my throat or something, because it totally destroyed me. And he had taken like a teaspoon and mixed it with 8 ounces of water. He just happened to have it was like the last teaspoon or something. And so that was the day before Tough Mudder X. And so the next day when I was racing, my throat hurt so freaking bad. I was sweating like a pig for the next like 2.5 hours. My stomach felt like crazy. And then fast forward a year, at the next Tough Mudder X, he's like, yeah, dude, you just got to like slam a whole bunch of fruit juice and stuff leading up to it, because it's really fast burning available carbs. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And so I go a little too far with it. And instead of just drinking like, half a bottle of orange juice or something, the day before, I think I drank an orange juice, a full lemonade thing, and like I don't know what that was, like a raspberry juice, like probably like 40 ounces of fruit juice. And well, we all know what happened there. So don't let people who are super successful just tell you something, because that doesn't mean that one, that's what they're doing, and two, that they actually know what they're doing. Smell a little bit. Have you seen that documentary with Arnold?
Game Changers?
No, Game Changers. He's gone vegan, dude. He's never looked so good in his life. It's called Pumping Iron. And in the interview, one of his interviews, he talks about how this guy came up to him at a bodybuilding show, and he told him, he's like, "Oh, I'm a huge fan. You're incredible. You're my inspiration. Do you have any last minute tips before I go on stage?" So Arnold looks at the guy dead serious, and he's like, "When you go out there," I'm not even going to try and do his accent. He's like, "Just go up on stage, and every flex you hit, just scream at the top of your lungs and just stare at the judges while you're screaming as loud as you can." And so this guy goes out there, he does it, and Arnold's just sitting in the back like losing his mind. And I'm like, I would be that guy. I'd be the guy that would listen to Hunter telling me that I should only eat PB&Js 24/7 for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I'm pretty influenceable, apparently.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So yes. And I mean, so to actually get to this non_OCR listeners point, what I'm getting at is you test things out before a race. So if you've got a simulation coming up, or if you've got any trainings that maybe have a similar intensity, maybe not for the same volume, or a similar volume, maybe not even for the same intensity, that might be a time to try out a little carb loading strategy. Like if you know you've got a long run on Sunday that is, you know, you're pushing the intensity a bit, but maybe it's only 5 miles, you know, or 10K, and you've got a super coming up. Well, then you can start playing around with a little bit of carb loading strategies. For a shorter distance, I guess taking a step back, your muscles only have a certain amount of carbohydrate that they can store. All right. So ultimately what carb loading is trying to do is to super compensate you're trying to not super compensate, but the words slip in my mind, but essentially you're trying to super saturate your stores of carbohydrate in the muscle. So let's say if you've only got, you know, maybe 2,500 calories worth of energy that you can store throughout your whole muscle, you're trying to maybe eke out getting 2,700 in there. So traditional carb loading, you used to actually deplete yourself of carbohydrate and then super compensate it. And then studies started showing you actually don't have to deplete yourself. You can just straight chuck carbs in and you'll eventually super saturate. So a lot of strategies that I've seen are that between 1 and 3 days before your race, so in this case, before your training, you can try somewhere, depending on the distance and the intensity of the race, somewhere between, let's say, 7 to 10 grams per kilogram of body weight of carbohydrate. So if you weigh, let's say, 70 kilos, so about 155 pounds, then you might eat somewhere in the neighborhood of 490 grams of carbohydrates up to 700 grams of carbohydrates every day for 1 to 3 days before the race. Now, you can do that leading up to this training simulation and see how you feel. Start low and titrate your way up. Like, you have probably a long race life, or, you know, race timeline. You're probably gonna have a few seasons if you have _OCR in your Instagram handle. So you can afford to take a few training simulations where, okay, I'll start small. I'll start at, like, let's say 7 grams per kilogram every day for 2 days, maybe 1 day. You know, just see what a small one is. Start small, see if that improves your performance, or see if that you feel good with that. And if you do, then maybe hit your next race with that. And then next time you've got a race coming up, see if maybe, you know, 7 grams for 3 days or 8 grams for 2 days works well. And just experiment. You know, there's no hard and fast rule for it. You've got to play around a little bit, see what works for you. If you find that you're someone like Benny that poops your pants when you carb load leading up to a training simulation, maybe you carb load for 2 days, then you have a normal amount of carbohydrates the day before the simulation, and see if your gastrointestinal reaction is still poor on the simulation day. If not, maybe that's the strategy for you. Maybe you put a little buffer day in between your loading and your simulation. Nice. And then that way you've got a strategy that works for you, instead of just being like, oh, 7 to 10 grams for 1 to 3 days. I want to carb load as hard as possible. So I'm going to do 10 grams for 3 days leading up to a race. And I'm going to have rocket fuel. Everyone else is going to be eating my dust.
Yeah. Well, they'll be eating something coming out the back of you. So with those carbs that people are choosing, this was something that I hadn't been aware of, except for when we talked like a couple of years ago. Yeah, it was 2 years ago at this point. You talked about how I think you said there's 3 different main types of carb sources. You know, there's like, it's like sucrose or fructose, or simple something. So you can't just eat a shit ton of pasta to hit all 10 grams per whatever. You got to mix it up, right?
Yeah, I think mixing it up makes the most sense because essentially you're like when you eat something, your body starts breaking it down by chewing, and then it goes into your stomach where it actually hits the hydrochloric acid and starts kind of breaking down into a bit of a soup, really increases the surface area there. Then all of a sudden this sphincter, what a good word, eh? This sphincter in your stomach opens up, drops that little soup that's been created into your small intestine. And that's where you actually start seeing those smaller building blocks of carbohydrate, protein, fat, these smaller nutrients being taken out. They have to actively be taken out of the intestines by your body. And so glucose is going to have a different transporter than fructose. All right. Okay. So you're going to have different transporters for each of the monosaccharides. So that's the simple carbohydrates. You're going to have different transporters out of the gut. So you can cause a traffic jam if you're just eating pasta, which is going to be pretty much starch, which is just chains of glucose. So when it's broken down, it just becomes glucose, this one little thing. So imagine there's a tunnel that only glucose can get pulled through, and then there's a tunnel that only fructose can get pulled through. So if you cause a traffic jam on the glucose by only eating pasta or something that's really starch heavy, then you might feel some stomach upset. Okay. So if you were to instead do something like, this is one of my favorites, is you can do rice with fruit. It's like I was just in Thailand for a nice long vacation, and mango sticky rice is everywhere. That's actually a pretty good thing that you can throw in the mix. I used to, when I would chuck some carbs in before like weekend CrossFit competitions, the night before my dessert would usually be like 2 cups of rice with a bunch of mango and some other fruit. And I would just crush that. It was usually like mango, banana, rice. And then that way I'm getting some different mix of carbohydrates in, so they're not all competing for the same transporters out of the gut.
So this is brown rice or
generally white? Didn't feel... Dude, you're splitting hairs. I like white rice, so I ate white rice, but that doesn't mean that brown rice is bad. I just like the taste of white rice better, especially with fruit. So, so getting that mix. So fruit, for example, is going to have both glucose and fructose, but it might have higher fructose content than a starch. Starches would be things like pasta, anything from grains, beans are going to have a bit more starch in them, potato, sweet potato. And then, sucrose is actually a mixture of glucose and fructose. So sucrose being table sugar. So anything that's got some sugar in it, like cereal, for example. Cereal is usually going to be a starch base, something that's like a corn or rice or wheat-based cereal. And then it's usually going to have some type of sugar, sucrose, on it. So cereal is another thing that you can, eat that will help with some carb loading. I know you're probably pretty excited about that.
So does that mean that there's essentially 3, because you're talking about the different tunnels, like are there 2 or 3? There's sucrose, glucose, and then what was the other one?
Well, sucrose, glucose, fructose, but sucrose is a mixture of glucose and fructose.
So that one doesn't get its own little receptacle. It's going to be broken down into going into either one of those other 2 things. I know those are just metaphors, but yeah.
Yeah, so generally your body actually has to break down carbohydrates into monosaccharides to then be transported out of the gut. So I'm mentioning glucose and fructose, but galactose is also another monosaccharide. Okay, so you've got then disaccharides, which are made up of 2 monosaccharides. We don't need to go into a full lesson, but sucrose is a disaccharide made up of glucose and fructose.
Gotcha.
And then you've got like lactose as well, which is a nice famous one, is also a disaccharide.
Look at that. I am lactose intolerant. I found that out pretty quickly. Also living with Hunter. Okay. I'm going to ask you one last one. This is by _Shua_Reed. No OCR, but he's very much an OCR fellow. Could he beat Hunter in a thumb wrestling match?
Oh man. I don't think I can do very well in thumb wrestling because I've actually pretty badly injured both my thumbs. And my wife and I wrestle all the time in many different formats, not because we hate each other, because we love each other. And she is actually a physio, like pretty much physical therapist. So she has like therapist thumbs. And she kicks my ass in thumb wrestling. So like my mental state when I go into thumb wrestling is like, I can't beat my wife in this. So who am I?
That was a pretty good honest answer there.
Yeah. But there's a few different types of wrestling that I think I could beat Hunter in.
Oh yeah?
You remember that one? Like leg wrestling, for example, but not the Indian leg wrestling like you guys did where he flipped you.
Whoa.
After Tough Mudder X?
Whoa, sir. Hold up for the record. I beat him 3 times in a row before he beat me, and that is on video. Thank you, good sir. I also beat Atkins. Okay. I beat Atkins too.
Yeah. I forgot you were actually really good at that. But no, I'm talking about that leg wrestling that we were doing where Cole was so drunk after Tough Mudder X that we were like, okay, we're doing the leg wrestling. And I think it was like Cole versus, it might have been Kempson or something like that. And Cole just throws like a ninja kick going for face.
What?
You know? Dude, so people probably can't see this, but if you remember, this is the leg wrestling where you're on one leg and you've got the other leg and you use the other leg to try to like push the person off balance. And you've got a circle. And so you've got one leg where you can kind of like push someone from the hips down.
Not kick, but push.
Not kick, but yeah, you use it as like a push leg.
Okay.
And you've got the circle and you either try to push them out of the circle or you try to get their other foot to touch the ground.
Okay.
And so I think I know I could beat Hunter in that because I'm a boss at that.
Dude, where the hell was I? Was this when I was like drunk and like bathing myself in the kitchen sink? Because I don't remember this at all.
Was that the first time you got drunk?
That was the first time I'd been drunk, yes.
That's so funny. That was probably the first time I'd been drunk in like a year. So I think we were on the same page. But yeah, I think you were probably bathing yourself in the sink at that point. But yeah, I think that's one. And I'd actually, at this point, Hunter's looking real jacked and juicy, so I don't think I could beat him in arm wrestling anymore. But arm wrestling's been a hidden talent of mine for a long time, even when I was like a small, skinny dude. So
he's like sworn that off because it's so bad for your ligaments and your arm, and it's such a skill set that you could be like the strongest dude in the world, but the best arm wrestler in the world is gonna crush you because it's like a skill set. I don't know what it is, but like I'm not good at it. I don't know if it's because I have long levers or what, but no, if you tell him that, he's still super pissed about when David Magida, I think, beat him in arm wrestling like 5 years ago at Tahoe or Killington or something. So you should bring that up with him if you actually want to arm wrestle him, because he'll get fired up.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'll have to give it a go.
Yeah. All right, Matt, my friend, that is about all the deets I'm gonna squeeze out of you for this episode. You are in Australia. Oh, by the way, were you affected by all that crazy fire-ish?
Yeah, well, I live on the Sunshine Coast. We had a pretty bad fire early in the season, and then luckily all the fireys got all the subsequent fires under control pretty fast, so we were pretty lucky where I live. We did have some fires, but New South Wales is where it's the worst right now, just completely out of control. And right now, you probably can't see it, but it was raining during our interview, and like I went surfing the other day and it looked like Thor was pissed. Like, wow. I was out there and the wind was just howling and there was hail and rain, and it was a really fun surf session, but I could tell that the land, we've had floods now because we had in one day, I think down towards the Gold Coast, like between us and the Gold Coast, there were some places that got 300 millimeters of rain over the course of 2 hours, which is like 10 inches.
Holy cow.
In 2 hours. Yeah. So there was some flooding throughout Queensland.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it's not one thing or it's the other, but Australians are very resilient people.
Yeah. Freaking crazy. Everything over there is either trying to kill you or eat you.
they think the same thing about the U.S.
Well, they think the people are trying to kill each other. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd rather it be people.
And we have bears. They have koalas.
Okay, well, that's true. Koalas are adorable.
So they think, so they come to the States and they're like, if I go out in the wilderness, a bear's going to eat me. Or if I go to the city, someone's going to shoot me. So it's like everyone's afraid of what's on the other side of the fence.
That's a really good point. That's a fantastic point. I hadn't thought about it like that. All right, where can people find you or more nutrition information, or how do they get involved with Beyond Macros if they want to fine-tune their nutrition game?
Yeah, man. So with Beyond Macros, the type of coaching that we provide is generally to help people create a sustainable transformation in their body. So anybody who's listening who, enjoys OCR, but really you want to actually figure out how to make eating as easy as possible and see the changes in your body you want to see that last a lifetime, like that's what we really truly specialize in, is helping our clients make that lasting transformation, that, as I mentioned, that change between the ears, so to really change their own stories around like what it takes to actually have that body and change those identity and limiting belief things that always have them going back to the weight they don't want to be at or the body composition they don't want to be at. Like that's really truly where we thrive. But we also have Rich Ryan from Reinforced Running on staff as well as a coach. And so we do help some OCR athletes with their performance nutrition as well. But yeah, where we really thrive is what I mentioned there. So you can check out beyondmacros.com. You can see some of our free resources. Really just hit us up. We would be happy to send you any resources that make sense for your situation. And if you're interested in seeing what working together looks like, you can't miss the link to apply for an initial call on our website. And anybody who's listening who's a coach and wants to add nutrition coaching to their mix and make it something that actually is profitable, pays well, that's what I'm focusing on at the moment, is really just mentoring nutrition coaches to actually create a business where finding clients is easy, retaining clients is easy, and those clients have such a good experience they want to tell everybody. Get on podcasts, ask questions to Benny. Hey, Benny, I have a question. My nutrition coach is the best. Tell everybody about them.
Nice little plug.
Yeah. So, that's pretty much where we're at. Everything's at beyondmacros.com. Whether you're interested in coaching or mentorship as a coach, you'll be able to get some more info there.
Sweet sauce. And that will be in the show notes for anybody who can't remember a simple website. Through your ears, you will be able to run your eyes across it and type it in. Matt, thanks a lot for coming on. Do we still call you Walrath?
Yeah, I didn't change my name when we got married.
Well, no. Walrath is not your last name. Walrath. Wait, I just spoke with your buddy Alex Craighead. He was the last one I had on the podcast, actually.
No way.
Yeah, from Journeyman.
Yeah, I actually volunteered with them, not last year because I was over here, but the year prior.
Yeah. I meant to bring this up at the beginning. I totally forgot. Yeah, you came up one time because we were trying to figure out how I was introduced to him. But yeah, it was you who introduced me to a super cool guy, really cool organization. I want to do basically what you did. I want to get involved with them like that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic organization. I mean, I've done a bunch of fundraising for them and was a mentor for their quest. And I mean, Nikki, who is Alex's co-founder of Journeyman, was one of my best friends in college. And yeah, man, I love what they're doing.
Yeah.
Love what they're doing. It's for, anybody who listened to the last episode probably knows all about it. So I don't need to plug them.
Right. Yeah, they know. We spent an hour and a half talking about boys to men. All right, dude. It was good chatting with you. We'll probably have you again in the future.
Awesome, man. Look forward to it.
Peace.
Visit obstacledominator.com for show notes, training, and racing resources.